Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We are continuing our independent football predictions today, and we are here at LaVell Edwards Stadium, home of the BYU Cougars, and we're going to talk some BYU football and give you our 2018 predictions for this season. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right on in. BYU returns 14 starters this year, 7 on offense and 7 on defense. Kalani Sitake, a couple months ago, I did a video on coaches that I thought could be on the hot seat going into this year, and Sitake was one of them. He's 13-13 in his 2 years here at BYU, going 9-4 in year one, but just 4-9 last year. So I think this is a big make or break year for him. I know it's only been 3 years. You've got to give some coaches some time, especially with the injuries they've had these past couple years. But still, if he has another year like he had last year, could we see him out of a job and no longer the head coach at BYU? On offense, they returned Tanner Mangum, their quarterback, who got injured last year, and this was the 6th time in the past 8 years that the starting quarterback for the Cougars has been injured for the season. It doesn't have to necessarily be at the beginning of the season. It's at some point in the season their starting quarterback has been hurt and out for the years. But they do return him, and that's going to be the key, much like any team, to keep your quarterback healthy. And that's going to be huge for BYU if they want to have success and get back to a bowl game this year. They return Zachary Katoa at running back. He's going to be a freshman, but should have a lot of talent there, hopefully to take a little pressure off from Mangum in that passing game there. They returned wide receiver Dylan Cawley and Matt Bushman at tight end, who I believe was their leading receiver last year. So a big return for the Cougars. On defense, their linebackers are all seniors, so this is going to probably be the strength for BYU this year is their defense. They're going to be led by Zane Anderson and Sion Taki at linebacker positions, and then on the secondary you've got Chris Wilcox and Troy Warner, both cornerbacks. So, like I said, I think the defense will actually be the strength for BYU this season because last year, despite going 4-9, they only allowed 24.7 points per game. On offense, though, they only averaged 17.1 points per game and were held to 14 points or less 7 times. So we'll go ahead and jump right into the schedule. It's another brutal schedule to start off the year. Last year, they faced the likes of LSU, Wisconsin, Boise State, Mississippi State, Utah. Those 5 solid opponents they had to face last year. This year, first 3 games are against Arizona, California, and Wisconsin. 2 of those on the road. They open up against the Wildcats. I'm going to go ahead and mark that down as a loss here. It's the beginning of the Kevin Sumlin era, and I just don't know how they're going to be able to compete against this Kevin Sumlin offense and Khalil Tate, the solid dual-threat quarterback. Is going to be very, very talented. A team that I think will surprise a lot of people in the Pac-12 South. So I think with it being on the road, 2 years ago, BYU beat Arizona at BYU. I just don't see that happening this year with it being on the road and the type of team Arizona has. California, week 2. A team that surprised me a lot last year, going 5-7, and Justin Wilcox's first year did a great job as a first-year head coach. I expect them to get back to a bowl game with 18 returning starters, 10 on offense and 8 on defense. I love Ross Bowers at quarterback, so despite having this game being played here at LaVell Edwards Stadium, I think they're going to get another loss to the Golden Bears to start off the season 0-2. And like I said, this California team is no slouch in the Pac-12 and could surprise a lot of people, cracking 7, maybe 8 wins. At Wisconsin, I can go ahead and mark that down as another loss here. I believe it was last year here at LaVell Edwards Stadium. They lost, I believe, 40-6 to the Badgers. Wisconsin's going to even have a better offense than they did last year. Defense going to remain strong. They're constantly going to remain a college football playoff contender this year. So I have BYU starting off the season 0-3. They're all against very solid opponents. And I know I'm basing this a little bit off of last year, but I just don't know how quickly Sitake and this team can turn around after the horrendous season they had last year. But like I said, Mangum is going to be the key. They get McNeese State at home, and that's going to be a win without a doubt. So they're 1-3. And then they get Washington. So you look at the first 4 of the 5 games, or 4 of the first 5 games are against extremely difficult opponents for a BYU team that does have a lot of questions on both sides of the ball. At Washington, Jake Browning, Myles Gaskin, solid defense, Chris Peterson, offensive mastermind, and it's on the road. There are no signs, in my opinion, pointing to a BYU win here. So I'm going to give them another loss to the Huskies. And then the schedule starts to lighten up a little bit. They start to face some more Mountain West opponents, some weaker opponents, in my opinion, and maybe they can start racking up some wins. But they played 12 games this year compared to 13 last year, and they already have 4 losses. So they're really going to need to start picking things up. They get Utah State at home, and Utah State returns 18 starters, 9 on offense, 9 on defense. You get quarterback Jordan Love back this year. Their top 3 wide receivers return for the Aggies. And last year, Utah State beat BYU 40-24 in that game on the road. This game, I know it's at BYU, so that's going to help a little bit. And BYU should be, in theory, a little bit better than last year. But I think this Utah State team is good enough to once again make a bowl game, especially with the experience they return. And I want to give BYU another loss here to Utah State. But I give them a win here against Hawaii, a Hawaii team that was going to struggle in the Mountain West, had a horrible year last year. Maybe if they had kept Drew Brown at quarterback, maybe I could get them to maybe a couple more wins, 4 or 5 wins, maybe crack a bowl eligibility. But Drew Brown transferred to Oklahoma State. A lot of questions for Hawaii, only returns 9 starters. BYU was able to go on the road and win last year at Hawaii 30-20, and I expect them to get a win over the Rainbow Warriors again this year. And then they get a bye week, much needed bye week. And if you look, they got 2 wins, so they're 2-5. So they really got to go on a big time stretch here to even try to make a bowl game, get to 6 wins, maybe 5, depending on how that works out. And then they get Northern Illinois. And Northern Illinois is also coming off a bye week this week. So you got 2 rested teams. Northern Illinois love this team with Marcus Childers at quarterback, Sutton Smith on defensive end. They returned 14 returning starters, beat Nebraska on the road last year. I'm going to give BYU a win here, though. It's at home. They're coming off a bye week. They know what's at stake. They know that they've got to get start racking up these wins in the next 5 games to try to get to a bowl game. And I think they're going to be able to get a big-time win over the Huskies here, and definitely a team that's going to surprise some people in the MAC. Then at Boise State, at UMass, and at Utah, 3 of their remaining 4 games on the road. Boise State, got to give them a loss here. This is maybe Brian Harsin's best team that he's had at Boise State. 10 returning starters on defense. We always think of Boise State as being an offensive team, and they are. They always have a solid offense. They got Brett Rippon at quarterback this year, 6 returning starters there. They got Alex Madison, the returning running back, who led the team with rushing yards last year, but only lose 1 returning starter on the defensive side of the ball. I just don't see them going on the road and beating the Broncos. At UMass, another independent team, a team that I think can crack a bowl game for the first time since joining the FBS in 2012. Last year they lost to the Minutemen 16-10. But this year, Massachusetts returns 9 offensive starters, including Andrew Ford at quarterback, Marquise Young at running back, and Andy Isabella at wide receiver. A triple threat there for the Minutemen. This is a team that I really think showed a lot of improvement towards the end of last season and could get to a bowl game this season. So a loss for BYU there as well, unfortunately. But they get a big-time win over New Mexico State, back at home. They're really out of bowl eligibility, out of bowl contention at this point, but I think they get a win over the Aggies, who transferred from Sunbelt to Independent. They return their top 3 playmakers, and Tyler Rogers at quarterback, Larry Rose at running back, and then Jaleel Scott at the wide receiving position. So they lose their triple threat, unlike UMass, who returns their triple threat. They are going to have a solid defense, though, but I think BYU gets a win over an Aggies team that I think will struggle a little bit in the transition from Sunbelt to Independent. And then they close out the year, rivalry week, in the Holy War, where the Cougars have lost 7 straight to the Utes. And this game being at Utah, they hung with Utah last year, but before we knew the train wreck season that BYU was going to have, they only lost to the Utes by 6 last year. But I think it's going to be 8 straight losses for BYU this season to the Utes. Utah has too much firepower on the offensive side of the ball. You got Tyler Huntley, you've got Zach Moss, you've got a very strong secondary for the Utes this year, a team that I think could potentially get to their first Pac-12 championship game ever. So it's going to be a tough out for them to play their rival in the season finale, and that's going to give BYU a 4-8 season on the year. And I know a lot of people are going to be disappointed with that after going 4-9 last year. But when you look at the talent that BYU has come back this year, they do have some. I think they will be a little bit improved, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But just look at this schedule. Arizona, California, Wisconsin, Washington, a solid Boise State team they have to face on the road, Utah. So it's a tough schedule. I mean, there alone, you've got 5 games, Arizona, California, Wisconsin, Washington, and Utah, that I think are going to be losses for them. And so then you've got to win, 6 of your last 7 to get to a bowl game. I mean, it's going to be a tough year for the Cougars. I'm curious to see how they respond to this with Kalani Sitake. Does he remain as a head coach next year going to 2019, or is he out of a job at the end of this year? But here we are with BYU going 4-8 here at beautiful LaVell Edwards Stadium. Make sure to continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.